Alan and I have been talking about theology all week. We have not been arguing. We're just having some spirited conversations. And when we started this conversation, he, like Kevin, didn't think that Unitarian Universalists had a theology. You'll have to ask him later if I have convinced him otherwise. But I understand why. Theology literally means the study of God or the divine. And as you know, Unitarian Universalists have no creeds. We don't require beliefs. We don't have to believe in God in order to be one of us. Many UUs do not believe in God or in any kind of higher or greater or deeper power, no matter how we name it. Freedom of belief is one of the most important components of our faith. So if that is true, how can we have a theology? The problem, I think, lies in the definition. We are not literalists here when it comes to religious definitions or most anything. But even in academic circles, the definition of theology is far broader than the literal meaning of the word. Theology is the study of religious faith, practice, and experience, including but not limited to the study of God. So theology is simply our thoughts and our ideas about the sacred dimension of life as we understand it and experience it, specifically as part of an organized religion, or in our case, perhaps slightly less organized. When people tell me they love what they've learned about Unitarian Universalism, but they have an allergy to organized religion, I usually tell them, don't worry. But organized or not, Unitarian Universalism is indeed a religion with our own history, rituals, practices, and institutions. There's theology for every religion. There are uncountable thoughts and ideas about every religion on the planet, and there are uncountable thoughts and ideas about how each person who practices each one of those religions understands it, how they understand their own sacred dimension, and also how they live and practice that dimension. And theology covers all of it. So if we understand theology that way, as our awareness, understanding, and experience, both collectively and individually, of what this faith actually is, what it means to us, how we experience it, then yes, Unitarian Universalism absolutely has theology. And if this came as a surprise to you, either this morning or 2 weeks ago when Lee preached an excellent introductory sermon on the topic, I have to say it's probably my fault, because I don't think I make it clear enough to you often enough that what we are doing here is deeply theological. I think I'm like the metaphorical fish who doesn't realize it's in the water. I'm swimming in theology, but I forget to actually notice the water and tell you about it. And it is my responsibility to do that. It's my responsibility to teach you Unitarian Universalist theology explicitly, not just implicitly. So consider today your first lesson. Even though we don't require people to believe certain things or the same things, Unitarian Universalist does have theological positions on many of those difficult and demanding and perplexing questions that human beings ask and look to religion to answer. It's just that our answers require work. So in this way, I would say that Unitarian Universalist theology is more like IKEA than, say, Jordan's furniture. You have to do your own assembly. And like IKEA, it can be utterly maddening. When you're in the midst of it and all the parts are lying all over the floor and you've lost that damn little wrench thing, and there are only pictures on the instructions which tell you nothing, especially if you are not mechanically inclined. But one of the essential components of our theology is that there is great value in putting it together yourself. Because when you do that, it really becomes yours. And you understand it from the inside out. So our answers to the big questions, the questions that people so often turn to religion to help with, are never simple. They often lead to more questions. And as a Unitarian Universalist, you don't have to agree with the answers I'm going to offer you. But here are some examples of what I mean. Question: what is UU theology about the afterlife? What happens after we die? Answer: we don't know. We believe that no one actually knows until they get there, if there is a there. She's here. So we have to live with this great unknowing, with this great uncertainty. We can decide for ourselves what we believe, what we hope for, what might be, or we can let the mystery simply be. Our certainty is that we are here now, and that this life is precious no matter what happens. Question: what about heaven and hell? Is there any concept of heaven and hell in our tradition? Answer: we follow the teachings of our Universalist spiritual ancestors who believed fiercely that there was no hell, because the nature of God is love, and love does not condemn anyone. This was a radical, heretical teaching in the mid-1700s in America, and in many ways it still is now. Hell doesn't exist in our tradition except for the kind that we create. Likewise, we also follow the teachings of Jesus, who taught about creating heaven right here on earth. And the heaven he described was all about the eradication of poverty and the inclusion of the most marginalized. He spells it out pretty clearly in the part of the Gospel of Matthew known as the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the merciful, for they experience mercy. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Question: what about sin? Do UUs have a position on sin? Well, yes and no. The word sin comes from the Hebrew chata, which means to miss the mark. In this sense, sin is simply part of being human. We miss the mark. I just did. I am so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Right after Mama, it always happens.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
I misgendered our beloved Lee. Missing the mark. This is why we practice forgiveness for ourselves and one another, and why it's so important. However, no, we reject the traditional Christian doctrine of original sin, which states that babies come into this world in a state of sinfulness. Quite the opposite, in fact. We believe in original blessing, that inherent worth and dignity is our birthright. Question: do Unitarian Universalists believe in evil then? Well, given the nightly news and the reality of the cruelty that most of us have witnessed or experienced ourselves, it would be pretty hard not to believe in evil. But like hell, evil is something that we do to one another. UU minister Reverend Dr. Rosemary Bray McNatt describes evil this way: as our human capacity to turn in on ourselves so completely that we lose sight of our connections to one another and to that greater source that holds us together. Whenever we forget who we are, whose we are, and what our relationship to one another is, there lies the breeding ground for evil. Evil has its origins in the abandonment of hope and meaning among those who have lost or never known their core identity as children of the holy. There are so many components of Unitarian Universalist theology that are so beautiful and so powerful. There is humility. Humility as an essential response to the mysteries of life on this planet. There is so much we don't know. And there are so many ways to live in this world. And so our faith asks us to remember always that our perspective is just one among many. And as Lee said 2 weeks ago, we could always be wrong. There is the responsibility and freedom to change, both as individuals and as a faith. And there is working on behalf of justice, what in the Jewish tradition is called tikkun olam, the repair of the world. For Unitarian Universalists in particular, theology is personal, as Kevin talked about so beautifully. It's work that we are invited and encouraged to take on, because another important component of our theology is the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. As Lee said in their sermon 2 weeks ago, theology is grappling with questions like these. What do we believe about God? What does it mean to be human? How do we want to live? Who will we be to each other? What do we most deeply trust? What gets us through the worst night? What do we do with our pain? What holds us together in religious community? What are our ultimate concerns and hopes? What seeds do we want to plant while we're here? How will we use our lives? Now, you don't have to wrestle with these questions to live in this world. Not everyone can, and not everyone wants to. You don't have to assemble your own theology. in order to be a Unitarian Universalist, to live a UU life. But I think that if we can, it helps. It helps to know what our theology is, to put those elusive words to what we do believe in, which is so much harder than knowing what we don't believe in. We ask those who take the newcomer class to write their statement of belief and to read it out loud. And we ask our coming of age youth to do the same thing, because we have learned over and over again that there is power in naming things. There is power in claiming them for ourselves and in reckoning with the truth, honestly, that there's almost always a gap between what we believe in and what we do. But maybe one of the goals of this life school we're all attending together is to narrow that gap between our beliefs and our actual lives, to close the space just a little bit between our beliefs and our lives. What would you put on your list? What do you believe in? I would say, try to get enough sleep. Eat an orange every day. Hope for everything. Spend as much time as you can with people who make you laugh until your stomach hurts. I would say that showing up matters, even when you don't know what to say or you're afraid. I would say kindness is almost always the answer. And listen to children, because they are closer to that sacred dimension of life than a lot of us. And theology just comes pouring out of them. Just one recent example was given to me by Meredith Cater, who is Abby and Mason's mom. And Abby, who is 9, almost 10, gave me permission to share the story her mother told me. So Meredith said they were driving in the car and the kids are in the back seat. And unprompted, Abby says to Mason, "Mason, there are only 2 things that are always true about people. 1, all people make mistakes. 2, all people are beautiful." A beautiful Unitarian Universalist theology, if I ever heard one.